Welcome back to the Recharge Zone podcast. I'm your host, Brent Doty, joined by my co-host, Ann-Margaret Gonzalez. Hi, Ann-Margaret.
Hi.
And today we have a special guest, Dr. Robert Mace. Robert, how you doing?
Doing great.
Thanks for joining us, Robert. So today, this is a special edition of the Recharge Zone podcast. We're out here on a glass-bottom boat on Spring Lake in San Marcos, Texas, here at the Meadows Center for the Environment. So we wanted to go on location today with Robert to talk all things water and springs. And so without further ado, I'll give an introduction to Robert. He is the Executive Director and Chief Water Policy Officer at the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment, and a Professor of Practice in the Department of Geography and Environmental Science at Texas State University. Robert has over 30 years of experience in hydrology, hydrogeology, stakeholder processes, and water policy, mostly in Texas. That's a lot, Robert, but you've had a long and storied career, and we're so grateful for you to be here today.
I'm super grateful myself.
All right. So first question, Robert, can you tell us about the significance these springs have for you, both personally and professionally?
I guess personally, this is just simply a beautiful place. There's an amazing amount of history here. There's evidence of people living here going back more than 10,000 years. It's thought to be the longest continuously inhabited place in the United States. Native American activity. Then Ed Burleson came along. He and his buddies formed San Marcos, but then Ed built a dam. Ed Burleson, if you're not familiar, he's like a hero of the Texas Revolution. He was the one that led the charge on Santa Anna. And although some people argue with that, I think some people argue that the Army just took off on its own. But anyways, built this dam in the very late 1800s. And then since then, it's been a source of power for city of San Marcos. It was an ice factory at the dam. For well over 100 years, this has been a place that people have enjoyed coming to go boating and see and admire the springs, which we're on a boat right now, by the way, so we can look down. The water's super clear. There goes a giant bass. People have enjoyed doing this for well over 100 years. And then also, as a hydrogeologist, it's like typically when you go see your, the love of your life, just like you, you're looking at PVC pipes sticking out of the ground, right? So here is just a super dramatic expression of surface water, groundwater interaction where the springs are dramatically bubbling up out of the Edwards Aquifer, forming the headwaters of San Marcos River, which then flows through campus and continues down and converges with the Guadalupe River.
So, Robert, I know with the Edwards Aquifer Habitat Conservation Plan, you are a part of the implementing committee. So can you talk about how the EAHCP protects the very species that live in the San Marcos Springs?
Sure. And I'm currently on the implementing committee representing the Texas State University. Before that, I was on the science committee. And then before that, I was even on the science committee for the group that helped develop the Habitat Conservation Plan. I tell folks that if it wasn't for the HCP, the springs would not be here today. The path that Central Texas was on, particularly with San Antonio and farming, models projected that business as usual would have turned these springs into something that looks more like San Antonio Springs, which flows during the good times and doesn't flow during dry spells with the increased usage. And so the Habitat Conservation Plan and the endangered species it protects is protective of these springs and keep these springs flowing. Not only these springs, but also the springs at Kamal Springs. It's also, I think, been valuable in helping to restore Spring Lake that we're floating on right now, but then also the river that flows through town. And so I think it's made it much more beautiful place to be, in addition to be a happier home for the species that we're seeking to protect.
Absolutely.
So, Robert, you mentioned, the aquifer was on track to sort of be in a decline overall. And even with the HCP in place and all these measures in place, we still see sequences of drought and good years and bad years. And this last year, 2022, was one of, if not the most intense years on record for drought in terms of lack of rainfall and temperatures combined. So how has that affected spring flow up into this point that we're at right now?
So it's certainly been an interesting last 3 years, 3 years in a row of La Nina conditions, and that tends to mean hotter, drier conditions for Texas. It has delivered. Currently, spring flows are about 90 cubic feet per second, which is about half of what's normal for this time of year. And then also for this time of year, you need to go back to 1957 to find lower flows. I mean, generally, we would see a wetter winter. We would see water levels come up. We would see the springs come up along with those increased water levels. And we've just not seen that. Now, currently, we seem to be seeing some rainfall. Keep our fingers crossed. La Nina has gone away. They're predicting a El Nino for the fall. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, but it could be a challenging summer if we don't get more rain before our normal hot, dry summer hits.
Definitely, Robert, the conditions have been pretty bad as of late, but we have seen more rainfall, as you mentioned, and hoping for a recovery in the months to come here. I want to talk a little bit, if we could, about the changes in San Marcos Springs over the years. Some of our viewers may know, but this spring actually used to be home to an entertainment venue. It was they had Ralph the Swimming Pig and mermaid divers. So what went from the amusement park to what we see today? How did that happen?
Yeah, so this place used to be known, and still, quite frankly, known by a lot of locals as Aquarena Springs.
We're on Aquarena Drive, right?
Yes, just off of Aquarena Drive. And the Aquarena name comes from aqua and arena, because there was a submersible theater down on the opposite shore that people could get into and then watch the shows. The mermaids drinking Coca-Colas and doing different things. There was a couple actually got married underwater.
Wow.
Here.
And movies were filmed here.
Movies are filmed. Piranha. So if you want to go see, get a little taste of what things looked like back in the day, go check out the original Piranha movie. Right. I can't, it's probably a 1-star movie, but it's worth seeing. It was kind of riffing on the Jaws franchise. Yeah, it's kind of when Jaws got popular, it was like, all right, we're gonna do Piranha. And of course, Ralph the Swimming Pig. There was like a volcano and a Tarzan, and then different sky rides. And so the university bought this property in '94 and actually continued to run the theme park for 2 years before shutting it down. There's a lot of folks that are kind of a little sore about the park being shut down, but the infrastructure was getting long in the tooth. It was becoming a maintenance nightmare, and then also competition, Six Flags, SeaWorld, and things like that. And so with shutting down the theme park, became a priority to restore the site, because again, we became aware that there's endangered species here. And so the Aquarena was taken out, received some funding from the Corps of Engineers. It was like a giant crane. It was before my time. I've seen the photos, though, giant crane to pull it out. And then we continue to make improvements and maintain the place. So we have a volunteer dive program. So if you're interested in diving, this is a wonderful place to learn how to dive, get certified, and then you can volunteer to essentially garden around the spring areas for the benefit of the species and the site.
Well, so Robert, I was going to ask you, can you tell us about some of the threatened and endangered species that live in the springs? And I mean, I know it's sad to say that you have a favorite, but do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I think I have two favorites. I really love the Texas wild rice. It requires flow. It almost looks like mermaid hair. It's just very beautiful, very green.
I love that description.
You start seeing it as you approach the dam, because the water starts to accelerate to go over the dam. And then you definitely see it in the river, from the dam, Spring Lake Dam, down to the confluence with the Blanket River. I think I also really like the Texas blind salamander. It's just a very bizarre looking beast, pretty cool looking. There's my favorite one is there's one named Godzilla. It used to be at the Fish and Wildlife Refugia, and I think they've lost where she went, but but those salamanders live a long time. If I'm remembering correctly, Godzilla was like 30 or 40 years old, which is pretty amazing. There's some other species out there. The fountain darter is pretty cute. It's like a great name for it because it kind of darts around the surface, near the fountains. But we see those also down the river and over the dam area. There's the San Marcos salamander. So it's a salamander that has eyeballs.
Kind of purplish, right?
Yeah, and those show up. There's a lot of them that show up kind of on the rubble side of the dam where the water's coming over, and they kind of like to hang out underneath the rocks. There's a couple beetles, a dryopid beetle and a riffle beetle, which I've never seen out in the wild. There's a Peck's Cave amphipod also that I've never seen out in the wild. We do have a discovery center that you can go see these species. The wild rice is really easy to see. You just kind of walk up to the river or go check out the dam area. You can see how gorgeous it is, but most of these other species are really hard to see. There's one species that's on the endangered list, the San Marcos gambusia, and similar to that 1980s band Men Without Hats, they have been neither seen nor heard from since 1983. So,
Robert, that was a great rundown of all the threatened and endangered species protected by the Habitat Conservation Plan, and a lot of them live in and around these springs, and some of them are only found in the San Marcos area. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Like Texas wild rice, for example, this is the only place in the world that Texas wild rice lives.
Okay, Robert. So, with the population growing, can you kind of talk about the future of water and what we can do to ensure that we have water for future generations?
Great question. I tell folks that the Edwards in many ways is protected with the Habitat Conservation Plan, with the way the Edwards Aquifer Authority is regulating. People that rely on water from the Edwards see those kind of drought restrictions. Taking those seriously would be an important step. And then, with all the growth, we're running out of what I would call like local water or easy water, and so the next water is going to be harder to get. And so, so you're seeing more of these bigger projects seeking to like maximize permits from the Edwards Aquifer, or seeking groundwater from the east, or some other surface water type projects. But there is one source of easy water that we can all contribute to, which is just using water more wisely, just being smarter about how we use water. My household in Austin, my wife and I, our gallons per capita per day is about 30 to 35 gallons per capita per day. Average Texan is more than twice that. And a big reason for that is we don't water outdoors. We have xeriscaping, and then we collect rainwater for watering outside. We have efficient fixtures and appliances inside. And so, everybody can participate in kind of lowering their water footprint, which overall saves us money in the future and also minimizes environmental impacts. We also have 8 cats, and so that works out to 7 gallons per mammal per day, which is really good. It could be lower if we got more cats, but 8 is enough.
That's awesome, Robert. 8 cats. In addition to these conservation practices, we see up-and-coming management systems. For example, recently there was a conference in San Antonio by the National Groundwater Association about managed aquifer recharge. So these are managed, engineered projects like aquifer storage and recovery, like slow it, sink it, spread it techniques meant to increase recharge and increase supplies and affirmative and yield. Can you talk a little bit about MAR and its significance in the conservation world and supplies in general?
Well, I think MAR is marvelous. It's a way to, I see MAR, Managed Aquifer Recharge. In Texas, we often refer to it as aquifer storage and recovery, in part because of our geology. We tend to need to inject it and then pull it back out. but it's a way of maximizing existing permits. And outside of the drought reductions that are required by the Edwards Aquifer Authority on users as we go in the drought, the San Antonio Water Systems Aquifer Storage and Recovery is, my opinion, the key strategy for protecting spring flows and protecting the resiliency of the water supply for all the users. And I don't know about you, but I giggle like a little kid when I think about that Aquifer Storage and Recovery project, because typically it's taking treated surface water and injecting it into an aquifer. In this case, it's taking water from the Edwards Aquifer and storing it in a different aquifer, the Carrizo Aquifer, and then pulling it back out. But that's been a rip-roaring success, approaching 200,000 acre feet per year, which is a lot of bloody water. And that's helped kind of San Antonio stave off drought restrictions within their city and their service area. But also it's helped to keep water levels in the aquifer up, which benefit the springs and the species.
Absolutely, Robert. So, MAR is marvelous, and we have Aquifer Storage and Recovery and all these creative solutions to enhance our water supply. That, coupled with conservation, allows aquifers to stay at more sustainable levels. But in the future, we're looking at, of course, climate change, which could mean more intense drought or more intense rainfall. It could mean, other factors in the future, such as growing population. So with all these factors coupled in, what do you expect to see in the future with water? What are we going to have to do to keep this up?
Great question. We're going to have to be smarter about how we use water. We're going to have to be much more efficient, because the more water we need, the more expensive that new water is going to be. San Antonio and others all along the I-35 growth corridor are looking towards the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer for future supplies, but lately I've been getting worried about that aquifer being overtapped. A number of chip manufacturing plants have been built, kind of showing, or planned to be built, showing how global politics is kind of affecting water resources here. And so there could be some major water level declines in that aquifer. When I look into my crystal ball, I see seawater desal at some point in the future. And San Antonio was looking at seawater desal for a while. They've been able to push that deeper into the future because of the Vista Ridge project. But it's hard for me to imagine not bringing desalted water up from the Gulf of Mexico. With all the growth that's happening here. I don't know what San Antonio's growth is. I live in Austin. Austin proper is expected to grow from 1 million people to 4 million people in 100 years. That's Austin proper. Greater Austin's 2 million people. It's probably going to grow to 10 million people. So we're looking at Houston level of population in Austin. I have to imagine San Antonio is the same. And we'll just be one, I don't know, Austinio, I don't know what it would be, Austintonio or something.
We'll still have better tacos, though. So.
Ooh, I don't know. Well, yeah, I think you're right. You guys have higher standards. You require house-made tortillas, which is a great requirement, because that makes a big difference.
So lastly, Robert, is there anything you'd like to share about the Meadows Center for the Water and the Environment for our listeners and viewers?
Sure. Well, what a great day to be out on a boat with y'all. Water's clear. It's like a great way to see the critters that live in here. We've actually got beavers that have moved into the area. Really? Yes, we have a beaver den on our wetland boardwalk that I'm kind of looking over there. Beaver babies. And there was a flood that came through here, and it flooded their den, and they all had to get on top of it. And it appeared they had a nutria as a pet. So, because there was a nutria hanging out with them as well. But come out. Yeah, but you should come out, and I encourage folks to come out, and this is like a great way to see the aquifer, bubbling up out of the system, forming headwaters for a river. We have a discovery hall that has examples of these species that we've talked about. You can check out, why we think the blind salamander is such a cool deal. So yeah, please come on down, go on a boat ride, kind of check out and everything that we've got to offer here, and learn more about the Edwards Aquifer.
somewhere down the road, or even maybe sooner, I think that the Edwards Aquifer Authority opened up an education outreach center about a year and a half or so ago, and we have three Texas blind salamanders now, and a couple fountain darters, yeah. And so I think, these types of educational facilities are a great way for people to learn about the aquifer. If you're in San Antonio and you can't make it out here to San Marcos, although I do feel like this should be on people's bucket list, because we're on a glass bottom boat. Like, what else? That's a bucket list thing. Thank you so much, Robert, for joining us on the podcast episode today.
Yeah, happy to be here, and thanks to our dedicated boat driver, Sam, who's kept us from crashing. And thank you all for inviting me to participate on this podcast and continuing your important work on conserving water and managing this system for the benefit of all.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Recharge Zone podcast. Have questions, ideas for topics, or things you would like to share with us? Well, reach out to us at rechargezone@edwardsaquifer.org.